live radio, local podcasts, the Frederick Podcast Network at listenfrederick.com.
The Fedora Files.
Hello and welcome to the Fedora Files. I'm Gregory Fedora, and with me today is a returning guest that we've had on, Mr. Jason Tapp from SpookyCLT. Right? I said that right? Yeah.
Yep.
Which is Spooky Charlotte.
Yeah, Spooky Charlotte, North Carolina.
Yeah. Now, last time you were here, you were telling me about Charlie Hawk, who was killed by a lion, and you were in the process of trying to get a new tombstone for him, and because that one was damaged, and it was a really intricate tombstone. It was really pretty, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So how's that going? I wanted to find out the update on there.
Yeah, so right now it's the beginning of October. We have paid for the new headstone. It's 100% paid for, and it will be installed before Halloween was the deadline we gave them.
Nice.
So within the next few weeks, we'll be able to, show you a picture of what the new headstone looks like. And to go off of that, so here I am in Charlotte, North Carolina. I run the account SpookyCLT. I'm doing my best to chronicle all things spooky about Charlotte, whether it be ghost stories, current paranormal activity. In this case of Charlie Hawk, it's a headstone from a guy who was killed by a lion here in Charlotte, North Carolina 100 years ago, which is a crazy thing by itself. But the fact that it was broken last time, or this time last year, and broken into a bunch of big pieces and just lying up against the fence, I took it upon myself to raise the money to have it restored. And at first we didn't really know what that was going to look like, but now we do. So what we paid for is pretty much for it to be recreated on a bigger stone. And on the forward-facing side, it's going to be a recreation of the original headstone with the etched in, with the garlands on top and the flower medallions. And then Charles Hawk, killed by a lion, January 30th, 1918. And then on the back of it is we implemented the old stone, put it into place like as it would be, and then that's now protected. So we have the old stone up in its upright position, and then we have a new stone that I shouldn't have to replace for the next 100 years. So within the next few weeks, I'll be able to show that off, which I'm really excited about.
That is awesome. Yeah, I remember when you came on and we talked about it, and you were raising the funds, and now it's like almost done.
It's almost done, and it's been crazy. So because of that project, I have weaseled my way into the historic Elmwood Pinewood Incorporated, like the board that it's a city owned, it's like the largest cemetery in Charlotte, so it's city ran, but they do like the landscaping and stuff when it comes to like stones being broken, putting wreaths out and flags out and stuff. They don't do that. It's up to a third party. So there's the historic Elmwood Pinewood Incorporated, which is like a foundation that looks over the cemetery. And I was just nominated to be on their board.
Very cool.
And I accepted. So now I am on the board of directors for this cemetery.
Very cool. Congrats, man. That's awesome.
I appreciate it. And last time we talked, it was around this time last year. And, I did I ran that historic tour / ghost hunt of a historic property in Charlotte as a fundraiser for this. And I was telling you that like one of the next fundraisers I wanted to do was a tour of Elmwood Pinewood. And that is happening in 2 weeks now.
Nice.
So I got the tour together. And I hope you're okay. I would love to tell you about the spooky things in Elmwood Cemetery here in Charlotte, North Carolina.
That's why you're here, man. You told me you had some stuff to tell me, so I want to hear about this.
Yeah, so I was bragging about it last time, so I didn't want to leave you hanging. So here we are in Elmwood Cemetery. It's 70 acres, pretty much right outside of what is Charlotte Uptown, like the city center of Charlotte, which I've talked about a lot in the past. We're here in North Carolina. It was actually established in like the 1850s. Not directly, but it was one of those situations where thank God it was there, because the main cemetery for Charlotte it's now called Settlers Cemetery, because it had like the original white settlers in it. Once it started filling up, the city was like, we need a backup plan for this. So
Hmm.
they started purchasing all this lands right outside Elmwood Cemetery, or right outside Uptown, which then became Elmwood Cemetery. And thank God, because 10 years later was the Civil War. And Charlotte had a lot of people that were involved with it, and they needed
Yeah.
places to bury them when they were brought home. Um, so now it is Charlotte's largest cemetery. And there's a lot of cool stuff in it. So at the right at the entrance of Elmwood, plot A, if you would, there is this beautiful white obelisk, and on it there is an etching of an elephant and a palm tree. And
Okay.
it was for a gentleman named John King. He died September 27th, 1880. He was the animal trainer for the John Robinson Circus, and he was actually known to be like an abuser, even though he was a
Okay.
trainer. And Chief the Elephant, who was like the head of the pack, said no more and crushed him to death. He
Wow.
stomped on him repeatedly. He killed John King, and actually took to the streets. So he escaped the circus and ran through what is uptown Charlotte. And he was so jacked up that they couldn't stop him. They actually had to like throw a lasso over him and attach him to a female elephant named Mary, because that was the only way he would calm down if he knew that his actions were going to affect the female
Mary.
elephant. Like that was the only way
Okay.
to get him to stop. So they attached him to Mary the elephant. They brought him back on the train. The next town over, he did the same thing. He killed the next trainer they brought in.
Oh wow.
So then they shipped him off to Cincinnati. And the Cincinnati people, they killed him by firing squad. A,
Okay.
a bunch of the town rich folk actually ate him as elephant steaks, which was not
Wow.
something that I knew happened. But here we are. They
There
did
you
that,
go.
and then they stuffed his body, and then they were using it in a parade for a number of years after that.
Oh.
So gruesome ends for both John King and Chief, unfortunately. But I always like to think of Chief as like a working class hero. You know, if your
Yeah.
working conditions are not good, stand up for yourself.
Yeah. And he
Um,
did.
and he did, and he
He did.
stands right on top of his oppressor.
Nice.
um, it's just so interesting. I would love to talk to the people that had John buried, because you know, Charlie, it said he was killed by a lion. In this
Yeah.
case, they're almost putting like a glorified picture of his murderer
On
on
his
on his
tombstone.
headstone. Yeah. Um, so I wonder the thought behind that. If at the time they were trying to hide that he was an abuser, make it like oh, it was an accident, you know.
Yeah.
But it's this beautiful obelisk. So that's the beginning of the tour. The next stop would be running down the street a little bit
Hmm.
further away, and there's a smaller headstone that just says unknown boy. And what
Okay.
it was it was a boy that was aged around like 14, 15 years old, and he was found in the 1930s. He was found crushed to death in a railroad boxcar.
Ooh.
So he stowed away. He hit
Yeah.
on this boxcar, something moved, it crushed him to death. No one has any idea who he is. What's crazy about it is a local women's group known as the King's Daughters.
Hmm.
They're the ones who bought the headstone for him. And they even went as far as getting his picture taken and then putting in the newspaper from here up to Jersey and down to Georgia. So all along the East Coast, they were trying to figure out who
Figure
this
out.
boy was by putting his, you know,
Yeah.
who is his dead body, a picture of it in the newspaper. And still to this day, no idea,
Wow.
right?
Yeah, that's sad. That's kind of sad, but it's like, wow,
It's terribly
that's crazy.
sad. Charlotte was definitely it's like a trading city, because we're
Hmm.
pretty much right on the trading path. That's why it was established. But like we still have a lot of trains that come and go through Charlotte. Um, so it was known for this, and the fact that it only really happened once is a miracle.
Hmm.
Um, the next story is a little bit sadder. And I'm gonna have to preface this whole tour. It's called the Haunted History Tour, and I asked them not to call it that because
Yeah.
these aren't really ghosts, you know, with
Yeah.
the exception of one later. But these are
Should
more
be
just macabre stories,
should be the tragic history tour.
right?
Yeah.
But interesting, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Tragically interesting history tour.
Tragically, yeah, exactly. So Foy Cooper, she died in September 1959. And what's sad about it is Foy was this older woman. And she would always visit her mother in Elmwood Cemetery. So her mother has this beautiful family plot, pretty much at the top, like the highest part of the city. And when you're up there, you can actually look out and see the skyline of Charlotte. It's a beautiful shot. Um, so Foy would go up to this spot nearly every weekend to visit her mother. And in September 1932, she was murdered there
Oh,
in
wow.
Elmwood Cemetery while visiting her mother, who was buried in a cemetery. And the murderer put her body, he stuffed it into a mausoleum in the cemetery. So Elmwood Pinewood was segregated between the Elmwood and the Pinewood section, and that person took her body from Elmwood, brought it over a fence because it was literally segregated by like
Hmm.
a large fence, and then he put it in a mausoleum over there.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until days later where a group of kids who had just seen Dracula in theaters on the big screen, they went to the cemetery afterwards to like keep the spooks going, and they were daring each other to go into mausoleums that were unlocked.
Oh,
And
wow.
they eventually came across the one that Foy Cooper was in, and they had to report it to the police that they found a dead body in the cemetery.
Oh,
Now,
wow.
the sad part is that, this was in Charlotte, North Carolina in the 1950s, 60s, still very much the Jim Crow South. And the police, they caught a guy. His name was Elmer Davis, and
Hmm.
he had just recently gotten out of prison for something completely unrelated. And they caught him. And they told the newspapers that he had a come to Jesus moment and told the police everything, that exactly what happened, why he did it. Exactly.
Mm.
You're giving me a look right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as soon as he went on like the witness stand, he said, absolutely not. They dehydrated me, they starved me, they beat me. I was gonna die unless I said that I did it. So I said that I did it. And he kept that story the entire time. And in 1966, he was set free because he was on death row that entire time for those 5 years.
Wow.
Um, but they set free. So we still don't know who killed Foy Cooper after all this time.
Oh, wow.
They got away with it. Sad,
Hmm.
but it's
Yeah.
crazy. I'm gonna be telling a group of people this story while standing in the exact spot that it happened.
Yeah.
Um, and we were just
That's
talking
eerie.
about ghost stories. It's cemeteries themselves have a little bit of a reputation of being like, spooky places with ghosts. But like I always thought, like, why would the ghosts be there if that's just where their like dead
Yeah.
body was brought? They wouldn't really know
Yeah.
that consciously. But in this case, if there was like a spirit wandering around Elmwood Cemetery, it would make perfect sense
That it would be her. Yeah.
that it would be her.
Yeah.
So whenever people tell me that they've seen like shadow figures and stuff, I'm like, this is the only lead that I have of
Yeah.
who it could possibly be.
Hmm.
So then walking through the tour, I would actually walk along what would be the Pinewood like divider line, which is now a walking path. I'd be able to point to the mausoleum where Foy Cooper was found, and I'd be bringing people to Charlie Hawk. And in this
Nice.
case, I'm really hoping it's going to be cutting it close, but I'm really hoping that I get to show off the newly established Charlie Hawk killed by a lion headstone.
Oh, yeah.
And I already gave you the tour. Or I already gave you the story. He was an animal trainer,
Hmm.
mauled by the Leo the lion. His arm was decapitated. He died on the hospital bed of St. Peter's, which is now condos. And believe it or not, like this past year, I've been talking nonstop about Charlie, and someone finally came forward and said, "Hey, you mentioned that St. Peter's is where he died. I live there, and we're constantly seeing shadow figures. Like the guy said, his girlfriend would visit him, and she would see stuff peeking around corners.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah, so I am not saying it's Charlie.
Yeah.
In fact, I found a newspaper article about a guy who worked, like the building was a hospital, changed to a hotel, then changed to condos. And when it was a hotel, there was a newspaper article about like the front desk guy who had worked there for over a decade, and he finally passed. But it was people talking about how much they loved him and how much he loved the hotel. So that
So,
makes more sense to me that he would be keeping an eye on the place after, but I don't know.
yeah, that's crazy.
All right, last two. I promise I'll make this quick. Um, is there is a gentleman right down the road from Charlie Hawk. His name is Alton Reed Freeman, and he was famous in the 1920s here in Charlotte because his wife um, cut off his head.
Oh,
Nearly cut off his head. Sorry, nearly cut off his head.
oh, okay.
She was known in the newspapers as the Razor Girl, almost as it like it became this whole publicity circus
Yeah.
because she was this like dainty little girl. She
Hmm.
was 20 something or early 20s, maybe even late teens, and um, Alton Freeman was this big guy.
Yeah.
And she told the police that they had an argument. He actually said that he was cheating on her and was going to leave her for the other woman. And she says she grabbed a straight razor and just nicked him. It was supposed to be just a little warning, back up.
Yeah.
But the police found him nearly decapitated, like literally his head falling off of his shoulders,
Yeah.
still attached, but barely. But she said, I just nicked him.
Yeah.
The
Oh,
crazy thing is that this was a media circus. They branded her the Razor Girl, but she got away with it because she said, or her lawyers more so, said that she had a temporary fit of insanity,
hmm.
and all of the newspapers loved her because she was like charming and like a
Yeah.
beautiful young girl. So when even her mother-in-law, so Alton's mom, was saying that, yeah, Alton was a drunk. He was faking an injury so he didn't have to go into work, which made the Razor Girl go to work. So everyone was on her sides, pretty much saying like, good for you. We would have done that if you hadn't.
Yeah.
Um, and after this, her and the mother-in-law remains friends. She got married to another guy, no incidents. And when she
Hmm.
died, 40 years later, it was because of heart failure. So
Oh,
it really was a one-off thing for her. It
crazy.
makes you wonder what that home life was like for this
Yeah.
tiny little girl to
That,
nearly
yeah.
decapitate this guy.
Yeah. And she should have tried to get like a sponsorship from like Gillette or something. It's like
Man,
after,
if this happened in,
yeah,
this year,
1980s or now. Yeah.
100%, she would have
Yeah.
had a contract with Netflix for a
Yeah.
true crime doc.
Exactly. Like that girl who killed her mom.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
For
there would be a movie based off of her where
she'd
Mia
have a
Goth would
huge
take her
yeah,
place or
she'd have a
something.
huge following on Instagram right now.
Yeah, she'd be
Yeah.
going through the podcast circuit.
Yeah, yeah. Like every week she'd sponsor a new like Dollar Shave Club or something would pick her
Oh
up.
gosh. I mean, I'll say in this in fun, it's 100 years later, so I feel like we
Yeah.
can talk
Yeah, we
about it
can joke about it,
candidly.
yeah, because it didn't happen yesterday. We can joke about it now.
We
She's
can
not
joke about it.
around, and his mom even wasn't sad about it.
Yeah.
So
She endorsed her son's killer, so that says a
that
lot.
says a lot. So
All right, so the last stop on the tour, and I'm really proud of this, is because it's about 40 feet away from John King. So I do a full circle in Elmwood
oh nice.
Cemetery, right underneath the mile. But it is actually a fireman's memorial because I'm going to be talking about Pruitt Black. And what's beautiful about it is like at this fireman's memorial, you can look at the Charlotte skyline and like the closest building to the cemetery is this 60-foot tall box condo building that's taller than anything in probably about 3 or 4 blocks. So it sticks out like a sore thumb. But at the base of it, right next to it, and you can't see this from the cemetery, but it's there because it's next to this apartment building, is a pre-World War II firehouse, one of three in Charlotte. So this building
Okay.
is over 100 years old. It's this
Wow.
two-story firehouse, and it is said to be haunted by the firefighter Pruitt Black, who died in 1934. And the way he died was it was an overnight call at the firehouse, and he was running towards the pole to slide down to the first floor. He slipped, went headfirst down the hole,
Oh.
and fractured his skull. He died on the spot.
Oh.
Uh-huh. The building remains operating for a little while. It turns into a firefighters museum,
Mhm.
and then it was sold again. It turns into office space. And when it was Office Space, is when stories started coming out that it was like this creative marketing company. So they kept a lot of stuff from the firefighter museum. They were even keeping like firefighter coats hung up on coat
Hmm.
racks at the main entrance, and like they had a few other things on display. But one of the coats would always end up on the ground, no matter
Hmm.
how well it was attached. And people were seeing apparitions of what they were saying looked like a, old timey firefighter running through a wall that used to be a doorway.
Hmm.
Um, and the big thing was, this was what they were experiencing the most, is there was the smell of cigar smell.
Okay.
And no one was lighting stogies in the middle of the workday, but they would
Yeah.
always smell cigars. And they, it's, this is one of the main stories in one of the only ghost books about Charlotte, North Carolina.
Hmm.
Um, and they interviewed people in that office. And when they were looking through old newspapers for stories about Pruitt Black, they did find one about his funeral where his other firefighters said that they were making jokes about how he was a chain smoker, and his
Hmm.
wife and kids had no idea.
Oh
So
wow.
he would come home smelling like smoke. He's a firefighter, you know?
Yeah.
They never thought anything of it, but he never smoked in front of his wife or kids. He would only do it at work.
Yeah.
And
Oh
now,
wow.
100 years later, here at the
You know.
firehouse is still smelling like cigar smoke,
Oh wow.
um, which is crazy. And then, in fact, firefighters still use this particular story about Pruitt falling headfirst down the fire pole because that call that he was responding to was a false alarm. There was
Oh.
no fire. There was no reason
Oh.
for him to die. So firefighters use a story now to tell people about how important it is to not waste the fire department's time, because they're
Yeah.
going to take it seriously every time, and it could get someone killed,
Yeah. That's crazy. I mean, that's a wild story there.
right?
Yeah.
Pruitt is buried in Elmwood, but he does have a tiny little headstone. So I bring people to the Fireman's Memorial just because it's um,
Bigger.
bigger, closer to the entrance, and it's such a perfect ending for the tour.
Yeah.
Now those are like the main stories. I do have a few other. I'm going to be telling people about like flat headstones, upright ones,
Hmm.
obelisks, mausoleum, crypts, kind of doing definitions, and then I have a lot of symbols that I'm going to point out to people too.
Hmm.
Urns, anchors, like flower medallions, air, just all that stuff. So I'm really
And it's
trying to make it
like
educational as well as get
entertaining.
people,
Yeah.
yeah, get
Yeah.
people spooked.
So how can people sign up for it? Or you still have room available or?
So I was asked to make this tour by the Historic Landmark Commission. So I'm
Mhm.
doing it through them. They're doing it as like a free event for the
Okay.
people. Yeah, but it's capped off at 40. I'm already sold out.
Oh
Um,
wow.
but because I made this tour, I got it approved. I'm on the board now. I have been certified to be a cemetery tour guide. I am one of two.
Nice.
I'm hoping to keep doing this more throughout the year as a way to raise money for the cemetery
Yeah.
itself, because I fixed the one headstone, and now I've put myself in a position where I am responsible for all of them now. so,
Yeah. Well, that's awesome though.
so I got some
Somebody.
work to do.
Yeah. Well, it's cool though because you saw a need and and like that kind of stuff. Like we've talked before about that. Like those kind of tombstones and stuff. Like
Hmm.
I mean, it's important to keep them because there is a story, there's a history to it, and like you're like really helping out, especially with Charlotte. Like this stuff,
Yeah.
like everything you do, like on your Instagram, like when I go and see, like you're like really like helping keep the stories, like the history, the folklore, and the paranormal all together. You kind of keep it all going, and
I do my best. I I'm a transplant to Charlotte, which everyone else is for the most part.
mhm,
It's definitely a younger city where the people you talk to pretty much have only been there for a few years.
mhm,
Um, and I fell in love with it. And I saw, like you said, I saw this need where so many new people were coming in saying Charlotte had no history, Charlotte had no culture. Um, and I knew that wasn't true.
yeah,
And the way that I figured out how best to tell people that was the one other thing that I was more passionate about, which was the paranormal.
yeah,
Um, so I'm using, ghost stories, folklore, to keep that history alive.
Hmm.
Um, and now, it started off with an Instagram account talking about ghost stories that I was reading about in books, and here I am now on the board of directors for a cemetery. So it's
Yeah.
keep moving. I have been slowly working on a book as well.
Oh, cool.
Um,
Is it going like over the stories of Charlotte? Because you
yeah,
said
yeah.
there's
I
only.
mean, it's about the stuff that I've kind of figured out over the past 6 years,
Mhm.
and what I've learned about the paranormal, what I've learned about Charlotte history, these different situations that I've found myself in. Um, so by the time I get my book out, you'll have 10 more out.
Maybe. Well, when you get it out, I need to get a copy. You gotta
Of
let me know
course,
where to get it, and I'll
right?
get one so I can. And then I'll have to have you on to talk about it. Of
Oh,
course, yeah, yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. I am working a couple more books. Yeah, and I've actually like taken a note from you, because you do a lot of storytelling and you're doing these tours. I recently got asked to, uh, tell stories at an event in
Hmm.
November, so that's going to be my first time, other than doing it on the podcast, like
Oh,
having an audience at a around a fire pit, and it's a whole event. It's called the Sleepy Hollow Fall Festival,
that's
and then
awesome.
so I was asked to tell like 5 stories, and
Okay.
I researched. I took like some folklore from the area, and then I kind of added, because a lot of them were very short,
Yeah.
just like this happened and blah blah blah. So I just kind of made them longer, kind of like made them, so it's still the same story. I just added to it to make it more entertaining. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
It's
but
I have two pieces of advice that this is for
yes,
everyone for the podcast. Is number one, everyone's going to say that they love it no matter what. So
yeah,
don't ever worry about people telling you that you did a bad job. And then
yeah.
number two is that always slow down.
Oh yeah.
That's it.
Take your time. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm planning to record them,
Okay.
and then put them up on Instagram as well after. Like I was thinking of recording them first and putting it, like no, because I want people to hear for the first time and I think it'll look better at around a fire, like
Yeah.
me telling the story as opposed to like, sharing it here. And
Yeah.
then so
Well, I
yeah.
say that, but like, um, this tour is coming up in 2 weeks, and one of the
Yeah.
ways that I was like, how am I gonna get this in my head so it comes
Hmm.
out smoother? And I was like, man, I gotta talk about it on podcasts.
Oh
So,
yeah. Well,
um,
definitely, yeah. This was a test run.
exactly.
And it's good. It's interesting. I know that you probably go into more detail at
Yeah.
the thing, which I don't want you to like ruin it. So if someone sees it, they're like, oh, I already heard it. No, so I want them to. But yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, I've been practicing myself, like going over the stories, so I know, like I'll have them there, but that way
Uh-huh.
I'm not exactly reading. I'll have it in my head. So
That's awesome.
yeah,
Sleepy
yeah. So
Hollow is one of those places that I want to visit.
oh yeah,
Um,
that's a bucket list that I want to get
yeah,
to.
but the movie Sleepy Hollow is always on my like the musts I have
Oh
to
yeah.
watch every October.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's on there, and Nightmare Before Christmas,
Just
and
watched that yesterday morning or
yeah,
yesterday afternoon
there you
during my
go.
kids' nap time.
Yeah,
I put it on.
yeah, the original Beetlejuice. I just saw Beetlejuice too.
What did you think?
I enjoyed it. I
Yeah,
actually, I don't know if you've seen it yet or not.
I have.
Uh, okay, but like as sequels go, I was like, that was probably my favorite sequel. Like they did
Yeah.
a like it didn't let me down. It added to me. It added more to the myth of
Mhm.
Beetlejuice, and like I don't want to give any away, but it also I liked what they did with the characters to like, how they explained it, kind of like, you know why some people were there, why others weren't,
Yeah. No,
how they did it. Yeah,
they
they
did
did a
they did
good
a
job.
lot of
Yeah,
creative storytelling. But I'm with you.
yeah,
I walked out of the theater being like, I'm always a hater. I'm so critical of a
yeah,
lot of these legacy sequels, because I feel like you have to really justify why you're there.
yeah,
Like why is a sequel besides making money? And this one, I was like, this didn't feel like a cash grab.
yeah.
It felt like it was just like a
Like,
you're checking in on the characters.
yeah, and it's almost like it was to the point where they did a good job of it could have almost been a standalone movie.
Yeah.
Like I mean, obviously you want if you I mean, there's some things you would have been missing about the some of the characters, but it was entertaining, and they even kind of like built some, or did some character building within this one to
Hmm.
see more. And I thought they did a great job of adding more to who Beetlejuice was, and I really like that. To me, that was really cool, just because I was just like, wow, that's really interesting twist that they were doing, the idea of who he was and why he was that way, and then
Uh-huh.
but
And the thing that I loved about it most, which is silly, but it was only like an hour and a half.
yeah,
And I love short ass movies. It left me almost wanting more, which is
yeah,
not usually the feeling. Like usually these movies are like 10, 20 minutes too long. And this one I left the theater like, man, I probably could have watched that for another half hour.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. And
so
it was almost, I was like, man, I wonder if they'll do another, and if they do, will they wait as long?
I hope they do. If that's the case, then yeah, I hope they do, where they wait another 20 years for Jenna Ortega to have a kid, and then,
Yeah, keep going and
just keep
just
going.
bring, just give Michael Keaton some uppers and get him. He'll be how old by that point? Like
It'll
80.
be AI anyways.
Yeah, yeah, it'd have to be at that point, I think, in 20 years. He's like in his 70s now.
Right?
So um
Gosh,
I think, yeah. But he was great in it. It was like oh, such a good movie. But
I'm with
yeah.
you. All right,
So
circling back to Charlotte, North Carolina.
yes, let's get back.
I'll tell you the other event that I'm going to be part of this
I was
month.
about to ask you what's their next. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
go ahead.
So in the past, I told you I was part of an event called Voices from the Past, which
Hmm.
is in, once again, Elmwood Cemetery, and it has people portraying different, like, famous, important people
Yeah.
in
And
the
weren't you
cemetery.
Charlie Hawk last year?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
That was
Yes.
I did it to raise money for the headstone.
Hmm.
And that doing it the second time this past April is what got me over the hump for what I needed to raise.
Oh,
So thank
cool.
goodness for that event. Um, but yeah, so we're doing a macabre version of that this year.
Okay.
So it'll be different, but it's still going to be people portraying like the kind of a lot of the same stories that I just told you about in my tour. Um, but they'll tell people how they died, like who they
Hmm.
were, what they did, in a more spooky fashion. Um, and we're excited for it. It's the first year that it's going to happen. It is
And
the last weekend of October, the 25th and 26th, that Friday,
oh, nice.
Saturday. And I can't even tell you more about it because we're still figuring it out.
Oh, well, I mean, I'm sure you'll have it on your Instagram,
Of
like when
course.
it comes to that, and that's SpookyCLT, if people don't know by
Yep.
now. Yeah. And
And then the weekends after that, we have the Drop Dead 5K, which is a 5K through Elmwood Cemetery. It's
nice.
our biggest fundraiser of the year. It always sells out. I have volunteered the past 4 years, but I'm actually volunteering and running it this year, which I'm
Oh, wow.
excited about. Um, and it's just cool. We have this beautiful 70-acre cemetery, and there's enough to run an entire 5K in it.
That's awesome.
Uh-huh. Um, and it's an event like no other.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're listening and you're in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, it's November 2nd, I think, um, that first Saturday of November. And
Oh,
it's
that's
it's just
perfect.
a cool event.
Oh, yeah. That'll be a lot of fun.
Hmm.
And do you have any other events after that coming up that you?
No, I have a 2-year-old at home, so
Yeah.
when all these events started coming into place back in like May, I was like, okay, that's 3 weekends in October. I'm done.
And
Like
then, yeah.
that's all I can handle. Um, so I'm sure I'll be talking more on podcasts and maybe a few news stories. Um, but yeah, this time of year, man, I mean,
Yeah.
it
Oh,
gets
yeah, it's
crazy.
fun. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Yeah. From now till because then like Krampus starts showing up, like
Krampus.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I got a couple Krampus events I'm going to be going to. So
And
yeah.
December this year has a Friday the 13th as well.
Oh, perfect.
So
Yeah.
hopefully that's when everyone does their Krampus party.
Yeah. That's when they should and
Yeah.
that's close enough. Like, cause
It's close enough. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. You
Yeah, I
don't
think
want
it's
to
the 16th or something. So
yeah. So I mean, that's perfect. Yeah. I need to check in it. That might be when they are. I'll have to look at I have to look at my schedule, but yeah,
Mhm.
I just know. But that's awesome. So you got a lot going on, man. You
Yeah,
got so
I'm keeping
much.
busy. Um, yeah, you know this stuff. You just keep moving forward.
And
Um,
oh, and I have a question about Normie.
okay,
Did
yeah.
did you find him or her this year, or
So
any new sightings?
we did go on Lake, or there was another Lake Norman Monster Week this past year. There
Yeah.
was another Lake Norman Monster Week meetup,
Hmm.
fourth year in a row, which was cool. I went on a radio station to talk about them,
Hmm.
and there has been recent sightings. They're reported
Okay.
on the website, which is lakenormanmonster.com. There's a
Yeah.
sighting sections, and there are some from 2024.
Nice.
Have I seen it? The answer is
No.
no. But it's all worth it, my quest for Normie, because on this fourth Lake Norman Monster Week,
Hmm.
two friends of mine who do not know each other, they're part of different friends groups. The two of them went on a date after Lake Norman Monster Week meetup. So
That's awesome.
if anything, if we haven't found Normie, we may have found some love. So I
Yeah.
think that makes it worth it.
Yeah. Normie brought love to the world, man. That's awesome.
Exactly.
And if they get married, they got to get married at Lake Norman.
They got to.
And
It
and
would it
I,
would make
I
sense for them.
and I think you should officiate it.
I'll
Like
let
that.
Normie officiate.
Oh, that'd be even better. Like he just shows up to do that. He starts. That's awesome. Yeah, I see. There's so many things. And oh, Owlcat. Any more Owlcat sightings?
No, but I talked to you were on their podcast, Inquiries of Reality.
Yeah.
I just talked to them this past week, and he had his buddy on the show that's from Raleigh, and I told
Mhm.
him the story too, and he was like, "I haven't heard that, but like I'm gonna keep my ears out now, for that." But I don't know. I think we're onto something. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
always talk about cryptids more in the summer,
Yeah.
than the fall. Cryptids are like a summer thing,
Yeah. Well, I
I
just
think.
had to ask because we talked about it. I think
Yeah, no,
not the
no new
last time, but the
sightings.
time before that we talked about it. Yeah. And then you made me research it, and then I ended up adding it to one of my books
Yep,
because then I found that there was some stuff with Native American, like talking
exactly.
about that.
Yeah,
And
the
so,
cat owl is not something that's new.
yeah,
It's just so crazy, that story, how two different people who did not know each other went on the same podcast one after the other, and they both
talked
were
about. Yeah.
had the same type of experience.
Yeah.
Two Charlotte residents had saw an owl cat, and
Wigged them out.
yeah, what are the chances? And I seriously, they can't be the only two people in all of Charlotte, you know?
No, there's got to be other, and
There's got
maybe
to be others.
there's probably others who don't know how to say it. And a lot of
Hmm.
times when people see stuff like that, they don't want to talk about it because they like
Yeah,
people are going to think they're crazy and they don't want that. And
exactly.
yeah.
No, but as soon as I have an update, you better believe that I'll let you know.
Oh yeah, I know. And definitely. So man, this is awesome. You got so much going on. I'm excited for you. I can't wait to see what's happening next. And I can't wait for you to get your book. I want it because I want
Don't hold your
you,
breath.
I I won't hold my breath because then I'll end up on one of your ghost tours if I do that. And then
There you
like,
go.
yeah, Gregory Fedora died by self-suffocation because he would not breathe till my book was done.
You can still see his fedora walking around.
Yeah. But then that could be good publicity to you and be like, and now it's done. And this is the book that he died waiting for. So, and
Yes,
then,
don't let him die in vain.
yeah, buy my book. And my gravestone will say that I was killed by Jason because he made me hold my breath.
And if it ever breaks, I promise to fix it.
Thank you. Thank you. I know you would. So that's it. Oh, I'm so glad you came on and contacted me and came back. And this is fun. It's always fun talking to you because you always have great stories.
I,
And
I try. Keep it
you,
interesting.
you don't just try, you succeed every
Oh,
time.
thanks.
Like every time you've been on, it's been interesting. I love hearing it. And I know you're going to be back and then you'll have even more crazy. Or do you have one more thing you want to share?
Well, so I will share to keep an eye on my Instagram account, because right now I'm doing 13 Ghosts of Charlotte, where
Okay.
pretty much every other day I'm posting a different specific ghost of Charlotte and their story. and a little bit of context of why they're important.
Cool.
So there's going to be
And-
some that you've probably recognized, some that are going to be new, but it's a comprehensive list.
Nice. And I'll have the link to those below so people can like click on it and go right to your Instagram and check it out. And
Absolutely.
maybe if they keep up with you, then they can get on some of these tours before they sell out, because they're always selling out, man.
Yeah.
So fast. And that's great though. That's what you want.
Mm-hmm.
But very cool. But I thank you again for coming on. I really appreciate it. It's always fun. And I will have you back hopefully sooner than later.
Yeah, man. I'm excited for your Sleepy Hollow event.
Yeah, I'll let you know how it goes. I'll be posting those videos when they come up. So
all right. Well, thanks for having me again.
Oh, always. And those of you checking us out, please go to SpookyCLT, check out his stuff, and subscribe to him and follow him, and because you will not regret it. It's every time I go on there's something new and interesting. I love it. And thank you for stopping by and checking me out. And as always, stay safe and keep searching.
The Fedora Files.
Check out FedoraCRT.com today.